Well, if you're watching that from South Africa, you're thinking, gee, Hartbeespoort Dam has never looked so good. No, it's not Hartbeespoort Dam. It is, in fact, the Amalfi Coast, and that is a purely self-indulgent start to Dan Really Likes Wine with Norman Goodfellows this week, because on Friday I shall be saying goodbye to South Africa for a couple of weeks and heading north partly to London, but kicking off with 10 days or thereabouts on the Amalfi Coast, taking in Naples, taking in Sorrento, taking in Vietri sul Mare, Cavadattieri, some of the most beautiful spots, not just in Italy, but I think in the world, because last night I went down a proper YouTube rabbit hole and spent about 3 hours watching random videos of the Amalfi Coast, and it really does look as beautiful as everybody tells me, including a guy called Forti and a guy called Stefano and a couple of other Italians who promised me that I'm in for a trip of a lifetime. And as someone who spends every summer with his family in Greece, my wife being Greek, I've got pretty high expectations of the Mediterranean, but gee, this part of the world looks fantastic. And so, as a result, I've rounded up the aforementioned Forti, the aforementioned Stefano, and a couple of other superstars of wine to introduce me to Italian wine, to give me a bit of framework ahead of my visit, and to let me know exactly what I should be looking out for, in particular, some wine by the name of Fantini and some wine by the name of Antinori, and those are very much on my list. Why? Well, I'll find out in just a moment. There's some very special guests on Dan Really Likes Wine. Italy beckons, and I could not be more excited. But before we head into our deep dive into the wine and the food and the people of Italy in general, the Amalfi Coast in particular, which I'm really excited about, let's have a very quick look at some of the latest wine news. So this is coming up at the beauty of Pal. This is the chance to head out and join the Manor House at Brookdale. This is 8,000 Rand for 2 nights. Sounds like rather a lot of money. Well, not when you get there. I think exactly that room was the one I stayed in last year when we went down to have a tasting of the field blend at Brookdale. Chiara Scott is the young winemaker who is doing such a terrific job in creating the wine at Brookdale, which is a brand new slice of Pal, a wonderful investment, some British investment into a corner of South Africa that I think over the last probably 10, 15 years has maybe not been quite as well celebrated as it should, as it could. The wines of Pal falling a little into the shadow of some of their neighbouring wine regions, but I think that is changing, and places like Brookdale are key to that. So this is your chance to head down to Brookdale, meet Chiara if she's around, and she is making some delightful wine. Her Mason Road range in particular, for wine that is not too expensive, but particularly good, as well as the opportunity to do some tasting across the range, including that field blend I mentioned a moment ago in the tasting room. And so that is an opportunity for you. If you'd like to get down to the Pal area, those manor suites are vast. They've got huge Olympic swimming pool-sized bathtubs, and they sit right in the heart of a gorgeous sweeping wine estate that is just waiting for your visit. You need to be a South African, but I think you probably are if you're going to be able to visit until the end of July, and that is up and running now for a winter promotion down in Pal with Brookdale. And then this is coming up on the 30th of May. Now, Nederburg is one of those estates that is almost a victim of its own success. It's been going for so long and doing so well for so long that there are a lot of people who sidestep it a bit. Oh, no, I don't really want to drink Nederburg, and often associate it with some of the wines that have been so successful. A wine like a Baron, for instance, that sits at a slightly more entry-level point of departure. But they have got wine that is at the top end that continues to be absolutely sensational. I think of wine like the 2 Centuries, the Bin R115. There's a range of wine that is very carefully made and very well made by the team of winemakers, Samuel heading them up. And the Nederburg team is going to be up on the 30th of May. Now, if you have the opportunity in Johannesburg to come through to our Nederburg team, to the Norman Goodfellows team in Fourways, the chance to drink some vintage Nederburg red. I think they've got some 2008 amongst the wines that are going to be on offer. So this is the chance to go back in time to drink some exceptional wine from Nederburg and possibly just change your perception on an estate that really does consistently deliver some really, really strong wine. So if you have a chance, do come and join us. All the details are on the Nederburg website. All right, so there we go. A couple of things to look out for, either a winter holiday or some time with Nederburg. Now, I'm not going down to Paarl on holiday for this particular offer, but I am heading on holiday on Friday. The chance to go and join a very good and old friend of mine in Cavadattieri for her wedding, Pamela and Brunello getting married next Thursday. And while I'm there, I'm going to be taking advantage of the region, which I haven't spent time in. I spent a bit of time in Rome, a little bit of time in Sicily, some time up the coast of the west coast of Italy, but never the Amalfi. And everybody who's ever been there speaks of it as being just such an absolutely staggeringly beautiful part of the wine world. So what should I be looking out for? Not just there, but across Italy. And how is the state of wine in Italy? Wine, I think we're seeing a little bit more of in South Africa. It's starting to pick up. And I think that's really important for us as South Africans to be drinking wine from other parts of the world to get a sense of what's different and also to give ourselves a bit of comparison for what we make here. So welcoming an all-star cast of Italians from different parts of the world, kicking off with Forti, who is one of South Africa's great chefs. He's a fabulous Italian import. I think we paid a fortune to bring him in. It's been worth every cent. So Fortunato, a very warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, and lovely to have you with us. We've also got an Italian who's sitting somewhere in Rwanda, Mauro, with Antinori joins us today. So a very warm welcome to Mauro. And then we've also got Stefano Gabba, who is part of Gabba International, bringing in wines, including the Fantini wines we're going to be drinking a little later on. And then we've got an all-star duo who are joining us also from the Fantini team to complete our lineup. So let's bring everybody in and say a very warm welcome to Fortunato Mazzano, to Mauro Pavesi, to Stefano Gabba, Lorenzo Gabba, and Alessia and Giulia Sciotti. Welcome, guys. Lovely to have you all in. My apologies for the Italian accents. I'm doing my best to get my head around all of them ahead of next week in Italy. But lovely to have you with us. Lovely to be chatting to you. And lovely to get some inside information because you are my expert panel ahead of my departure for Italy on Friday evening, which suggests I kick off with you, Forti, as somebody who's not only Italian, but from the very part of the world that I am going to. I'm planning to just show photos, Forti, of me with you everywhere I go, so I don't have to pay for anything, such, I believe, is your celebrity status in Italy. Before we talk about your part of the world, give us a little bit of the Forti background, because I don't think there's anybody, certainly in Gauteng, probably in South Africa, who hasn't eaten at one of your restaurants, who doesn't know of your legendary Italian cuisine and hospitality. Tell me the story of how Signore Mazzarato ended up in South Africa.
First of all, I got to tell you, Dan, your pronunciation of all the Italian names means that possibly after this program, we're going to have you whacked. Piero Antinori, listening to his pronunciation of his name, it's terrible. But you can tell Mr. Antinori that I've just opened, or my wife has just opened, a beautiful bottle of Antinori here. I'm feeling a bit, I'm feeling like I've been a traitor to my part of the world, but I had some nice Chianti here, and we're going to have a glass of Chianti while we're talking to you. I'm from an area of Italy called Avellino, which is a beautiful valley just inland from the Amalfi Coast, and it is pretty much the central wine area of the Campania area of Italy, which is the area that you are going to be in. So you're going to be going up and down the coast. But the beautiful thing about the wines of this area is that the wines of this area date from pre-Roman times, actually from the times of the Etruscans. And several of the big wine companies from this area, a good example being Maso Berardino, have taken and have done genetic sampling of the grape varietals, which they were able to find under the ash at Pompeii. And when they did genetic sampling of the grapes that they found in Augustine's vineyard in Pompeii, they discovered that it was genetically identical to the Aglianico that they were growing, Aglianico being the very big, full-bodied red wine of the area, genetically identical 2,000 years later. But we know for a fact that originally the Etruscans and then the Greeks grew vines in the area to produce beautiful wines. So when we say that we are the old world, we truly are the old world down there. We've been making wine for 2,500 years. And my apartment in Italy actually overlooks some of the most important vineyards of Avellino, including some of the very top producers. And all the guys that I interact with there and my friends who are the chefs from that area, we all have a wonderfully close relationship with some of the winemakers, some of the great ones, the small boutique producers like Vadiaperti, and then the big producers like Masso Berardino, Feidi, Di San Gregorio, and because many of them have great restaurants on the estates. But actually, the majority of the producers are very much mom and pop stores because they don't have a big budget to run massive operations with masses of labor as we do in South Africa. And often you will find that the winemaker is also the viticulturalist. He's the guy who drives the tractor. His family picks the grapes. And when we talk about a tasting room, there are no official wine routes on the Amalfi Coast. You'll actually have to make appointments to meet the winemakers or just take a bit of potluck and just pitch up. But normally you will receive a very, very warm welcome in the family kitchen. Some magnificent wines will be opened because you are going, and the other Italians on the panel will tell you, and not just because I'm biased, because I'm from Campania, but they are the most hospitable people in all of Italy. So generally speaking, you'll go and taste a wine and you'll end up having a meal, tasting lots of wine and coming away with an export license and a container of wine.
I've heard a couple of people who've said something similar, and this leads into my next question. I think you've partly answered it, but you can't go anywhere in the world without finding an Italian restaurant. There's somebody who does pizza, somebody who does pasta. Italian food is everywhere. When it comes to Italian wine, we do find a fair amount of it, but it's often in a fairly narrow set of parameters. It's a simple bottle of Chianti. It's some fairly basic, friendly, and certainly drinkable red wine, and then we kind of know that they're the super Tuscans up above, but there's often a big gap in terms of our knowledge of Italian wine, and certainly in South Africa. I think that's starting to change, and we're starting to understand a bit more. But Forti, give us a bit of a sketch of this breadth of Italian wine and why it's every bit as much something to seek out as Italian food.
Well, firstly, I must disagree with you in terms of the knowledge of Italian wine in South Africa is now vast. We carry over 140 labels in our wine shop alone, including wines from your other guests, Fantini. We carry wines from all parts of Italy because, of course, Italy is as a wine region. You can't call Italy a wine region. There are 13 wine-producing regions that make everything from the most delicate white wines of low alcohol coming from near Venice to the big, bold Tuscans where Signor or Count Antinori makes his wines, and other famous producers like Frescobaldi. And then you have the beautiful, big, enormous wines of Piedmont, which are, of course, the very famous Barolos at the moment, wines that take the same prices in the big international wine auctions of London and New York as first growth Bordeaux. Then you have the absolute maverick winemakers, guys like Gaia and Massetto, that produce wines of truly exceptional, unique quality. Because as time has evolved, the rules have relaxed slightly in Italy. So before, if you were a producer in Chianti, you were not permitted to grow certain grape varietals. What guys like Antinori have done is they've literally broken down those gates and now produce fantastic Cabernet, Merlot, etc. in those areas. But the further south you go, the more traditional it becomes. So as you come down Rome, you see the area of Suave and all those classic, the more easy drinking white wines. But once you get to where you're going in Avellino, of course, you've been to Sicily, so you know the wines there are very similar to the South African wines, because Sicily is a land of sun and powerful alcohol and volume. The beauty of the area we are in is that the grape varietals are truly ancient. They can produce grapes or wines of vast power, but the white wines of the region are amongst the most elegant and delicate of all of Italy. So the classic varietals are Coda di Volpe, Fiano. So Coda di Volpe were named the wolf's tail grape because the bunch looks very similar to a wolf's tail. And then the Fiano di Avellino, which many people call the Riesling of Italy. It's a wonderful grape with making wines of great focus and great, but a very linear intensity. And in the great varieties, it becomes a wine that scores regularly above 90 in all the major wine competitions of the world. And then of course several smaller varietals which are much more typical and of the region. And that's the beauty of Italy. I think you can find hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of varietals. I mean, not many people know Zinfandel, something we always associate with California. Zinfandel is an Italian grape varietal, you know, and originally went across to California with the Gallo family that eventually settled in California and planted the Italian grape varietal Zinfandel in California, which has now become the biggest, you know, sort of or the most important grape varietal of the area in terms of volume production. So for Italy, Italy is still the largest producer of wine in the world. And just like in South Africa, you know, there you get wine that is pretty ordinary, but you get wine that's ethereal, unbelievable. And obviously price would largely determine that. But in general, if I can say, wine is far more part of life in Italy. We always have a glass of wine with dinner. We have a glass of wine with lunch, but very rarely do you see a drunkard in Italy, because wine is much more part of life. Even children have a drop of wine at the table, sometimes mixed with water. And for us, wine is part of the pleasure of the table. And for me, definitely at the restaurants, I've always had enormous wine lists, because for me, wine is an integral part of the meal. It's the source of the meal. And it's 50% part of the experience. The beauty of Italy, because you have so many different styles, you have literally a wine for almost every dish. And you'll find generally, and this is the last point I'm going to make because I'm rambling, is that the wines from a specific part of Italy are often very much paired to the dishes of that region. So if you think of truffle, of wild mushroom, of very intense, rich beef-flavored dishes, you think of Piedmont. And then, of course, that's the area that the famous Barolo Barbaresco comes from. And if you think of the area that I come from, we have the most fabulous seafood in all of Italy on the Amalfi Coast. And of course, that would be the perfect pairing with the Fiano or the Coda di Volpe or those sort of wines. And then as you come slightly inland to Avellino, we mountain people, we Irpinia, from Irpinia. And so what do we eat? Wild boar. We do a lot of hunting. And we have our own truffles, the southern Italian truffles and mushroom. And then those go with a massively powerful Taurasi and Aglianico wines. So that, I think, is key to the area.
My hope when inviting my guests onto the show today was to narrow down what my options would be, to give me a little bit more focus. All Forti's done is give me another 1,000 wines I need to look out for, but it adds to the allure and the appeal. I did get a gentle smack on the wrist there for suggesting that the South African wine knowledge was perhaps not what should it be, quite not what it should be, but in my defense, Forti will naturally have a little more Italian wine than most. Stefano, you're bringing Italian wine into South Africa, bringing a whole range, including the Fantini we're going to chat to the team about in just a moment. What's your sense of the South African understanding and enjoyment of Italian wine? And are we seeing more Italian wine being drunk, being bought in South Africa?
I very much agree with what Fortunato said. You know, the knowledge of Italian wines in South Africa has increased by leaps and bounds in the last few years. As a company, we've concentrated very much on having the stalwarts of Italian wines available, and then building up around it a little bit more of the less common varieties, so that, you know, there would be no intimidating factor into approaching the wines in the first place. And then the desire after tasting, you know, let's say a Barolo, a Chianti. By the way, you are going to Italy to a wedding where the groom is going to call Brunello. I mean, that's unbelievable. You know, one of the most famous wines of Italy. But apart from that, I agree with Fortunato that the knowledge of even marginal wines in Italy has increased tremendously. We've taken a chance several times to import wines which we thought, you know, if everything goes well, we are going to have to drink it all because nobody's going to buy it. And we were so surprised. You know, we received so much support for new wines, so much understanding, so much desire to experiment, to evaluate these wines. And I think, you know, very much what you are going to have to do in Italy, concentrate on what Fortunato has been saying, go for the Aglianico, for the Fiano, for the Greco, for the Coda di Volpe, and then explore what different producers can offer in the way of wines from Campania. And another very important element is that, you know, once upon a time, elegance was to be found, as Fortunato said, especially in the north of Italy, possibly in Veneto, in Friuli, very much. But nowadays, the category of wines emerging from the southern part of Italy, and I would include in the southern part of Italy even areas which are more central in Italy, like, for instance, Abruzzo, Molise, and even Puglia. The quality, the refinement of the wines is unbelievable. We are going to talk today about wines from Abruzzo very much with the Fantini family. But, you know, just to jump back to Sicily for a moment, let us not forget the great phenomenon of wines coming from the Etna area. Wines that have been compared now, especially the red wines, but even the white wines, to the wines of Burgundy in elegance, refinement, enticement, and so on. So that's what I can tell you at this stage, and I'm open to further questions.
I see we've got Nicholas watching, who says, interesting about Zinfandel's origin, and that's not just a great fact to come out of Forti, but also part of the education of understanding what's available for Italy. Stefano, for you, as somebody who's bringing wine from Italy into South Africa, what's the challenge in terms of getting people to know and understand wine from Italy? And for someone who's never had Italian wine, what's the starting point for you? What's the point of reference in terms of introducing the best of Italy to a South African audience?
Well, the starting point, you know, that first of all, we have to differentiate between sparkling white and red wines. Sparkling wines, obviously, the first starting point would be Prosecco, which has become such an international phenomenon. Prosecco, it's the ideal aperitif, but some versions of Prosecco can be extremely refined and really combined with every dish and any dish. And we are considering now importing an even wider varieties of Prosecco to expose the South African wine lovers at large to a different experience of Prosecco. But then, you know, we can move in many other directions. Franciacorta, Langhe in Piedmont, where wines are being produced with the classical grapes. Don't forget that Prosecco is produced from a typical Italian grape called Glera. If we move towards Franciacorta, Trento DOC, which is in Franciacorta would be in the region of Lombardy, Trento would be in the region of Trentino, Langhe would be in Piedmont. They're all wines, sparkling wines of high quality being produced from the classic Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and challenging many non-vintage French champagne. Then when it comes to white wines, we always suggest that the first point of approach should be maybe the region around Verona, starting with some Soave, some Lugana, which offers incredible quality. What is challenging is that often the name of the wine does not reflect the grape contained into that wine. For instance, Lugana and Soave, the main grape would be called Garganega, but that can be absorbed one little bit at a time. The important thing is to recognize that these wines have a very specific identity. Then from that area, we can start moving towards the central. First of all, we can go towards Piedmont, and be confronted by wines like Cortese, or Gavi, which is actually made out of the grape called Cortese. Coming further down towards the center of Italy, a great find in terms of white wine would be Vermentino. And there is some excellent Vermentino being grown and produced in South Africa as well. And then we come to the central part of Italy, being the region of Lazio, of Rome, on the one side, on the Tyrrhenian Sea, and on the Adriatic, the region of Abruzzo and Molise, and then further down, Puglia. We find some excellent examples of white wines here. Frascati, from the village called Frascati above Rome, being a blend of some typical white grapes from the area, mainly of the Trebbiano and the Malvasia variety. And then moving towards Abruzzo, finding grapes of absolute distinction called Pecorino, same name as the cheese, but I'm sure that Giulia and Alessia will tell us more about that particular wine, the origin, and the way to consume it and to approach it. That's as far as white wines are concerned. We could go further down and talk more about, but Fortunato has done so well already about the wines of Campania or the wines of Sicily. Call about, the Cataratto of Sicily. We could go again to Sardinia. It would be a never-ending story. We need a program of 10 hours, not just about 1 hour. Red wines, let's keep it simple. We always get started with the three main Italian red grapes, the most traditional one. The one being, the Nebbiolo, which makes the great wines of Piemonte, Barolo, Barbaresco, and Nebbiolo itself. Then the Corvina, which makes the wines of Veneto by the names of Valpolicella and Amarone. And then, of course, coming to Tuscany, Sangiovese. These are the main grapes from which to start appreciating Italian wines. Then, once we have created a core of knowledge around these wines, we move towards expanding the horizons. And that's where companies like Fantini come in, with beautiful grapes called called Montepulciano d'Abruzzo. Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, which is a mouthful to pronounce, it's also a mouthful to drink. It is such a delightful wine. Again, Alessia and Giulia will tell us more about this particular wine. And then slowly move a little bit further south and then approach other wines. Incidentally, Zinfandel in Italy is known as Primitivo. The original name of the grape was Primitivo, and when it was transferred to the United States, it became Zinfandel. Now, a few people in Italy, on the strength of the success of Zinfandel in the United States, have obtained from the regional wine authority in Puglia, the main region for the production of Primitivo, to be able to call the wine Zinfandel instead of Primitivo. So careful, if you happen to go to Puglia, you're going to find Primitivo and Zinfandel. It's the same wine. Just remember that.
It is Educational Central on Dan Really Likes Wine with Norman Goodfellows this evening, and that continues. Now, we've got our team from Fantini, so let's head over to Alessia and Giulia. We've got a great background there from Stefano. Alessia, Giulia, lovely to have you on the show, and a warm welcome to it. Give us a bit of background on Fantini, wine of which Stefano is obviously a very big fan.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. So as you had a little bit of introduction with the Fortunato and Stefano, an introduction to Italy. Now we're going to speak a little bit more in detail of Abruzzo and south of Puglia, because our winery is located in Abruzzo. So our headquarters is in the center of Italy on the Adriatic coast, just a couple of hours from Rome, basically. But we produce wines in 7 regions of Italy. Mainly in the south of Italy. So at the time where our winery was founded in 1994, it was it was a big challenge for us, because outside of Italy, a lot of autochthon grape varieties that are produced in this region were not known, were unknown outside of Italy. So we had to invest a lot in promotion and talk about wines, training, to promote and to let the people understand the great potential of south of Italy native grape. So today we're going to go deep in Abruzzo. Abruzzo is a region that I think it's one of a region that has two main ingredients that are the most important for making excellent wine, which is mountain and seaside. So in Abruzzo you find the mountain and the coast that are very close to each other, and in the middle, in the valley that are in the middle between the mountains and the seaside, there are a lot of vineyards. So the big production of vineyard actually is located between the mountain and the seaside. What does it mean? Why it's so important, this ingredient? It's important because you create thermical excursion, which is the key for making wines, good wines, and especially for making white and rosé wines. During the day, indeed, during the harvest time, which is the hottest period of the year here in Abruzzo, it's always like during the day it's very hot, it's very warm, but during the night the temperatures drop. And this is fantastic because you can develop the acidity, which is very important, but at the same time, a good balance with the aromatic taste of the grape. So today with Alessia, we're gonna taste together two of our bestseller wines that is named Cala Lenta, and we will explain you why of this name, why we call it Cala Lenta. And the Montepulciano. Cala Lenta, we have the rosé, which is made with Merlot, because Merlot is one of the variety that is also cultivated in Abruzzo. And Cala Lenta Pecorino. As Stefano said, Pecorino is one of the native grape varieties that are in Abruzzo. And it's called like that because here in Abruzzo there is a famous things that it's a region that is famous also for artisanal cheese, artisanal let's say the sheep. So normally during the day, during the whole year, the sheep are, during the summer, the sheep lives in the top of the mountain. But then when it comes to the winter time, all these sheep goes down to the valley and goes, and they're looking for like a more warmer climate, more warmer area. So they goes down from the peak of the mountain, they go down to the valley, and happen that in the valley they found these typical white grape varieties that normally this period comes to the harvest time. So they stop in the vineyard and they start like eating the grapes, the fruit of the vines. And for this reason, the growers decided to name the Pecorino grape as the sheep. So Pecorino in Italian means sheep. So that's why we call it Pecorino. And there is also another legend that said that the Pecorino, Pecorino, the name of the grape, is called like that because the shape of the berries, the shape of the bunches of berries looks like the pecora, the face of the sheep. So there are apparently two legends behind the name of Pecorino. And another grapes that is, I will say, the best ambassador of this region is the Montepulciano d'Abruzzo. Be careful because a lot of people may confuse Montepulciano grape, that is Montepulciano d'Abruzzo grapes, with the Montepulciano city, which is located in Tuscany. So every time we do the training to our customer, we always have to make a differentiation. So the Montepulciano city is in Tuscany, but then we have native grape, which is Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, and is cultivated in Abruzzo. It's a very strong, powerful wine, and it's very versatile. So you can have Montepulciano, which is more easy drinking, but you can also vinify Montepulciano, which is very strong because you have a big presence of tannins and also the color. So in the past, I would say 6 years ago or 50 years ago, the Montepulciano was not so famous because a lot of growers were cultivating Montepulciano and sell it in bulk in other regions, because when the harvest was not so good, they were buy the Montepulciano from Abruzzo and put the Montepulciano in the blend of the wines of the region, just to enhance the tannins, enhance the color, because Montepulciano was very powerful wine. So only in the past coming years, we start like vinifying, promoting Montepulciano as varieties, as a wine. So only one grape wine. So this is a little bit of an overview of our company, and we are ready to taste some wine with you today.
All right. Well, as I get the wine poured, just a quick question as I come over. You've given me 3 wines I'm not going to forget. One of them is named after a cheese or thereabouts, a rosé made with Merlot, and then you made very clear Montepulciano is grape versus town. What about when I'm eating? And I ask this to both of you, Alessia and Giulia, from South Africa. We're still breaking down, and Forti will be the first to know this, we're breaking down some of those beliefs that many people still have, that a certain food has to go with a certain wine, and very strict on this. Thankfully, that's falling away, and chefs like Forti help us to do that. How strict is it in Italy? Are you very clear on what sort of wine goes with what sort of food? And if I'm drinking these 3 wines from Fantini, what sort of food should I be having with the 3 of them?
It's funny because regarding the pecorino, it's very funny because pecorino wine goes very well with pecorino cheese actually. So because it's an aromatic grapes, and if you heat it with the pecorino cheese, it gives a little bit of this nice sensation in the mouth that clean your palate every time, every like bite. Regarding the Montepulciano, it depends on what kind of Montepulciano are you tasting, because there are Montepulciano that are more, let's say, big, bold wines, so needs some like a little bit more rich food. And there are Montepulciano that are a little bit more easy drinking, so you can easily drink a glass of Montepulciano wine also without food, so as an aperitivo or just like for chilling with friends. And regarding the Merlot, which is the other wines that we are going to taste today, is a very nice rosé, which is fruity. And for example, it's my best partner during the summertime. So I'm not very strict with the food pairing. So it depends in my case, it depends very much on the mood, on the type of occasion. I try, of course, to combine very rich wine with some like food that is rich enough to sustain the body of the wines, but I don't want to be like a very strict on that. So I really believe that the wines need to be pleasant for everyone, so everyone can drink wine in different type of occasion, and of course follow their taste.
I'm really glad you have that philosophy. It's one I share as well. And we'll try that wine in just a moment. While I get it poured, let's head over to our final guest, who's been waiting very patiently. Somewhere in Rwanda, I think. Mauro, help me out here. What on earth is an Italian wine expert doing in, I think it's Kigali?
Correct. So I'm based in Kigali. I've been here for several years, and I've been working on the development of the business of Antinori in Africa for the last 8-9 years. So I've been traveling a bit around the continent and also to South Africa, of course, trying to explore the world of wine in Africa and find ways for our wines to reach the market in very different markets, of course, because very often people think of Africa as one place that works the same way no matter where you are. But in reality, there are huge differences from country to country. in terms of palate preferences, taxes, cost, and so on, of course. So, yeah.
So time spent in Africa building up this brand. What's the impact been from your perspective? We've heard some very positive stuff from our other guests. From what you've seen, the people of Africa drinking more Italian wine, understanding more Italian wine, and what sort of impact has Antinori specifically had on a broader African market?
Well, I think that Antinori has been one of the most innovative companies in the history of wine, not just in Italy, with some wines that have literally revolutionized also the way Italian producers have looked at wine. I mean, Tignanello is probably the most important example of all, which has driven really a revolution in the way most Italian producers approach wine now. And of course, and in this innovative approach, of course, they have also planted an Italian guy in Africa. So we are, I'm one of the few based in Africa trying to develop the business with a very long-term view, because of course it's everything is difficult, but being in Africa, in some countries, it's even more difficult. So they've been very innovative. And so I think we have gathered quite a bit of the knowledge about the trends in the market. And we have seen how South African wines have been really opening people's love for wine a bit everywhere in Africa, together, of course, with the French people in the French-speaking countries. And Italians probably have been trying to catch up a bit because, of course, there are many Italians around the continent. And as the other guests were pointing out, there are a lot of Italian restaurants. I've seen them anyway, really, in imaginable places. You have these small pizzerias spread in Zambia or in Burkina Faso. It's quite unbelievable. And of course, this is a great opportunity for us as Italian, as a country, because we have a lot of ambassadors spread around the continent. But then, of course, the ambition of Italian wine is also to get out of what I sometimes describe as the Italian ghetto, where we are confined to the world of Italian restaurants. And I think that brands like Antinori, there are other very good, very important brands from Italy. I've taken on this task in order to bring Italian wines, quality wines, to a wider audience, like it has happened everywhere else in the world. South Africa being one of the most important markets, I would say, where there is, of course, a lot of knowledge about wine, being such a wonderful wine-producing region. A lot of people that know about wine that can tell you inside out anything about a bottle of wine. And for us, it has been very, on the one hand, challenging, but on the other hand, very interesting. So we can see that especially our high-end wines have gathered a lot of attention, like elsewhere in the world. So we see that the level of appreciation of premium and super premium wines in South Africa is very high.
And that links directly to a lot of the wine I have drunk from Italy here, and also the wine I'm hoping to drink when I get over, and wine I've drunk in other parts of the world. I think in particular, Mauro, and this is probably thanks to you, some of the best Italian wine I've had in Africa has been alongside some of the best Italian food I've had in Africa, which is not one but 2 or 3 restaurants in Addis Ababa, which is home to extraordinarily good Italian food and wine. And it speaks to that broad sweep of Italian culture that pops up all over the world. I'm now heading to the home of Italian food and wine. Yes, I'm going to be in Naples and Amalfi, but just from a broader perspective of Italy as a whole, as somebody who's coming to spend some time in Italy, what's your guide to the novice in terms of looking at these 13 regions that Forti has told us about and getting an introduction to Italian food, and particularly Italian wine, with your understanding of wine in South Africa as a background of going into Italy to drink wine?
I think that it comes down to being open-minded, really, because I can tell you, for example, a couple of months ago, I was at Vinitaly, and I met a lot of people from Africa, and you would sit down with some and they would say, I remember, I know the people from Fantini. I went to visit their stand, as an example, and there were people falling in love with Grillo, the grape, the white wine they produce. So at the end of the day, no matter where you are in Italy, you will always find something very interesting. As you probably know, Italy is the country that uses the most varieties of native grapes. There are like 250, if I'm not wrong, that are being used, things that you will hardly find anywhere else in the world. So there is a lot, and it becomes sometimes overwhelming. But I think the most important thing is to be open, to be inspired, and also consider that very often the tradition, the food tradition, the culinary tradition of each region, and within the region, each small city has developed hand in hand with wine. So there are, as they were saying, for example, for Fantini, this pairing between white wine and the pecorino cheese. It's something that has evolved as a natural. It's like a natural selection, Darwinian way of natural selection of food and wine, basically. So there are some wines that probably are easier to access for South African people. Probably wines that are more full-bodied, and some wines from Tuscany can be like that, or the Primitivo. We also produce wines in Puglia through our winery called Tormaresca. So we have seen a lot of interest in South Africa, but also in the rest of Africa for more full-bodied wines, or the Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, of course. But then you will find amazing wines and amazing food to pair it with anywhere.
It looks like I'm a little short on time. I've only got 10 days. I think far more than that is clearly required. But it'll be the first of many trips. We'll come back to Mauro in a moment. But let's jump back to our team at Fantini. Alessia and Julia, I've got the first of the wines here, and this is your pecorino, which I'm already thinking, is it going to taste like cheese? It's going to go well with cheese, of course. While I drink it, give me an introduction and just a touch more detail. Why for you guys, this is a wine that really speaks to what you are trying to produce as something that celebrates the wine of Italy.
Yes, hi. Here I have the same wine. And yeah, this is Calalenta Pecorino, the one that Julia was telling you a little bit before. An interesting thing about this wine is that we harvest it during the night. That's why it comes from the name Calalenta, that in Italian means when the sun goes down. And that's because the temperature in Abruzzo, especially in harvest time, are very, very high. So it is very important to let's start the fermentation in the vineyard. So to do those two products, because we have the Pecorino, but also the Merlot, we do a new process called the cryomaturation. That means that when the grapes comes to the cellar, we start to work to do the vinification, taking care about oxygen and temperature. We dropped out the temperature around 3 degrees in the beginning, and that helps to improve the aromas of the wine. So if you try this kind of Calalenta Pecorino, on the nose, it is very, very intense as aromas, because we find out that control the oxygen and the temperature, the aromas that you find in the berries, you will find the same aromas also in the wine. So that's the main reason of why this Cala Lenta is so special. And after that, we can talk about the Cala Lenta Merlot, which is this one. And for us, the packaging is also very important. So Giulia was telling you before also the importance of, in Italy especially, of doing the aperitivo. And that's a perfect wine to drink with aperitif time, especially in summertime. This is 100% Merlot. That comes from an area in Abruzzo that is a valley between the mountains and the sea, where the soil is very rich in clay, and that helps the acidity of this wine to become very, very important. And then we have our last red wine, which is our Montepulciano d'Abruzzo. Montepulciano grape for us, it is very, very important because it is our brand ambassador of Abruzzo for the red grapes. This type of wine, we wanted to leave it very enjoyable and easy to drink, like an everyday wine. So as Giulia was saying before, Montepulciano has a very strong structure, very intense body. So in this case, we wanted to leave it very more soft, more fruity, more juicy. So it is very nice also to pair with different kind of food. Before we were talking about pairing, and yeah, so those are our three main products that we make at our brand ambassador of Abruzzo.
It is a terrific illustration of three very different types of wine, but three wines that are not only a little cool and exotic if you live in South Africa, but also really well priced. Look out for them on the Dan Really Likes Wine store with Norman Goodfellows. I think you're going to look at probably in the 300 rand range or thereabouts. This is really well priced wine, and wine that illustrates three very different interpretations of what is available from Italy. Let's jump back to Mauro very quickly. Mauro, we've had a look at some wine there from Fantini, and very happily so. Tell us quickly about two or three of the wines from Antinori that you think people from South Africa, people like myself perhaps coming to Italy, should be looking out for, wines that really speak to what you guys are trying to do.
So I would say that if you look at the portfolio that we have in South Africa, of course, Chianti plays a quite important role. We have a variety of Chianti in our portfolio. So we go from a more, I would say, entry level, even though it's pretty difficult in our case to call any of our wines entry level. But if you look at Chianti, we start from the first step is we have a Chianti Superiore in the Santa Cristina range. Going up, we go to the core of our tradition, which is Chianti Classico. Chianti Classico is the original region where Chianti was born. We have a wine called Pepoli. I don't know if Fortunato was showing one of our bottles. I didn't manage to see the label, but it could have been the Pepoli that he was holding. Otherwise, I mean, we have a long series from there going to Antinori, Classico Riserva, up to a wine that we call, the name is Badia Passignano, which is one of the very few. I think there are still only 35 Chianti Classico Riserva Gran Selezione. So it's the top of the appellation when it comes to Chianti. So for sure, I would suggest somebody that is in Chianti, maybe if you then pass through Chianti during your trip, I would suggest to try a variety of Chiantis because there is a lot to discover within the region. It's one of the most complicated regions in Italy, because we have so many denominations within the region, and each, of course, has a bit of let's say the goal to express the best way they can their type of Chianti, the way they do it.
I'm just scribbling away some notes there, either for this trip or for future, and there will be future, because what everybody has done today is made it clear that my 10 days in Naples and Amalfi is not nearly enough in terms of exploring Italy. And yes, I've done some before, but this is a slightly longer trip. I do have some guidelines. I want to get one or two final ones, though, before we wrap up. It's been a fascinating show, and one we'll need to repeat, I think, when I come back from Italy and see how everything is compared to what I have been told. Stefano, just in terms of the South African travel experience I'm looking forward to when I head over, I'm going to ask Forti something similar. What for you, from an Italian perspective? Yes, we know that pizza and pasta are rather well known, and you've referenced some great wine yourself. But for an absolutely definitive Italian food and wine experience, what's the dish, what's the wine that I'm combining to put the biggest smile possible on my face on my trip to Italy for you?
Dan, you're asking me an impossible question, and I hope I can answer it before load shedding hits me, quite frankly. I would suggest that you keep it as simple as possible. Look for the freshest bread of the day. Look for some genuine cheese from a small producer, and just sit quietly by yourself, with this piece of bread, the piece of cheese, and open the wine that takes your fancy on the day, and take it from there. Then walk into a small trattoria in Italy. Very, very simply say to them, look, I'm a foreigner, I'm coming from South Africa, I want to experience something that you would eat today. What can you suggest? Go that way. You cannot go wrong.
That sounds like pretty solid advice. Let me wrap up with our resident chef. Forti, the same question. This is slightly more your territory, your part of the world. I'm going to shamelessly drop your name, as I mentioned, wherever I go in the entire area. But if I am going down, the simplicity of food is, I think, the hallmark of so much of Mediterranean cuisine, but particularly this part of the world. I've got a dish to order. I've got a bottle of wine to wash it down with. What am I asking my waiter for?
Well, as I said to you in our conversation before, you're going to go to Posillipo in Naples, to restaurant Reginella, with the best view over the whole Bay of Naples. And you're going to speak to my friend Paolo, the sommelier, and drink a bottle of Fiano di Avellino with a beautiful crudo di pesce, a whole different mixture of wonderful raw fish, marinated oysters, octopus, the most amazing selection of fish served in a giant silver cloche with a view over the Bay of Naples. And I promise you, this moment is going to be the moment that changes your life, until the moment you go and eat at Aria with Chef Paolo Barale and have his 12-course tasting menu with 12 different wines from all the areas of Campania. And then I can't wait for you to try his veal course served with an orange wine grown on Capri. And you're going to taste something exceptional. But in the meanwhile, me and my wife are sitting here. She thinks Mauro is quite handsome, so we've opened one of my few bottles of Tignanello, because I made some peperonata tonight for dinner with a nice selection of peppers and aubergine vegetarian dinner. And we're going to drink a beautiful Tignanello in honor of my friend Piero Antinori, one of the true gentlemen of the world of wine. And it's been a pleasure to be with these wonderful people on your program. Lorenzo and his dad, who I know very well. Lovely to meet the people from Antinori, and very proud also to sell the wines of Fantini in our store. We love the pecorino, and we make our own pecorino cheese. As you know, I've gone into the cheese business, and tomorrow I'm going to serve some Fantini pecorino together with some of our pecorino cheese to our clients in honor of their presence here tonight.
Dan, wake up and smell the tomatoes.
A final piece of advice, that of course is V, Forti's wife, and if you recognize her, 2018 runner-up Miss Italy, but now living in Pretoria. I think what I'm going to have to do, Forti and V, is when I'm back from Italy, come and join you guys for a meal out in Pretoria. And you never know, maybe the Gabbas are in town as well, and we can look back at my Italian experience. You mentioned the restaurants; both of those are booked and raring to go, as is Team Nickel, as my wife and I prepare for our departure, and we will do so armed with so much cool information for our trip. Almost too much information, too much to look out for and to find, but that, I think, is the delight of life in Italy, much as it is in Greece from my regular visits there. The food, the wine, the people, the beauty, all come together for a quite extraordinary experience, and that awaits me. And so to our team, to our Fantini team of Alessia and Julia, guys, thank you so much for introducing me to Fantini and to the wines therein, and a big thank you for being part of the show. We're going to have you back on again and soon, hopefully have you in South Africa soon as well, and to Mauro as well for joining us from Kigali in Rwanda, and giving us some insight into Antinori, such a great and powerful wine brand, and one that, well, if Forti likes it, it must be good. Stefano, and I think we've had Lorenzo on board as well. To the Gabbas, guys, thank you so much for your part in today, and also to Team Forti out in Pretoria, the unofficial Italian High Commissioner to the northern half of South Africa, wrapping up our show. Guys, thank you. I'm beyond excited. I'm going to finish off my 3 great bottles of Fantini this evening, and then possibly go and find some Antinori, and maybe some Italian food to wrap up the evening. I'll keep you posted on my adventures when I get to Amalfi, and I hope to have you all back on the show soon, and Forti and V, and possibly Lorenzo and Stefano drinking some wine with you in Pretoria soon. But for now, guys, thank you all so much. It's been an absolute delight. I've learned a whole pile this evening, and I'm even more excited than I was already. So most sincerely, thank you all very, very much indeed, and cheers.
Cheers.
Ciao.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Salute.
So there we go, wonderful celebration of Italy here at Norman Goodfellows in 4 ways, which is pretty much the Tuscany of South Africa, really, as we run through the wines of Fantini, the wines of Antinori, but more importantly, getting a really vivid illustration of the importance of food and wine in Italian culture and how that has spread around the world, and not just with generic pizza and pasta, but with dishes far beyond that, more importantly for tonight, with wine that speaks to the 13 different regions that Forti introduced us to, and in the case of the wine this evening, some specific grapes, some specific spaces that are making wine that, based on this evening, I've got a lot to look forward to when I get to Italy on Saturday. I am off. We are now heading away from Italy and into Franschhoek, because in just a moment, to all of the guests who are joining us here at Norman Goodfellows, together with Global Group Sommelier Balizondo, I'm going to be sampling some wine of Haute Cabriere with Taquan, who may or may not have arrived with his sword to do some sobrage. Whether he does or not, we'll be trying some fabulous new wine from the reserve range at Haute Cabriere, the new Pinot Noir, the new Chardonnay, and the Van Arnhem Family Reserve, celebrating both Taquan and his father, Achim, one of the greats of South African winemaking. On Monday, well, by Monday, I'll be in Italy, but before that, Thursday, we will be celebrating top performers in Wine Mag's latest prescient reports. It's both the Chenin Blanc report and the Shiraz report. I was part of that voting, so expect some disastrous results, but delivered with great excitement. Until then, some wine with Haute Cabriere beckons. A big thank you to my Italian circle of friends for a wonderfully enlightening evening. I'll see you back on Thursday. Until then, in between South African wine, drink some Italian as well. It's pretty good stuff. Cheers. In the month of May, your chance to win a fine dining experience with Norman Goodfellows, Haute Cabriere, and Dan Really Likes Wine. Simply buy any bottle of Haute Cabriere wine. That could be a bottle of the Pierre Jourdain Bubbles or one of their still wines, including the brand new Reserve range, and you'll go into the draw to win a night out for 2 people for a fine dining experience valued at 15,000 Rand at either the Nines in Cape Town, Bel Punto in Durban, or Marble in Johannesburg. Get your wine either online at any of the Norman Goodfellows stores or online at the Dan Really Likes Wine store, and you're in the draw to win that fabulous prize guys through the month of May with Haute Cabriere, Norman Goodfellows, and Dan Really Likes Wine.